In this video, I'm going to detail out exactly how you can change your nutrition and your workouts in order to begin prepping for bodybuilding. Welcome to the video. My name is Trevor Lomax. I'm a registered dietitian who primarily works with guys who want to build muscle, but I also work with people who are trying to compete in their first bodybuilding show, whether that's men's physique, classic physique, or bodybuilding. So today we're going to talk about how I've changed my nutrition, my workouts, and my routines in order to begin preparing for the 2023 bodybuilding season. For those of you who have seen my previous videos, this one is going to be a little bit different, but very similar to the last video I made about my bodybuilding journey. This is part 2. So first, we're going to dive into nutrition, then we'll talk about my workouts, and then we'll talk about how I'm tracking progress all along the way to make sure that I am doing things right. So to prepare for the 2023 season, my first goal is to put on as much muscle mass as I possibly can and try to keep the excess fat at a minimum. The reason that we don't want to add a ton of fat is obviously once we start cutting, we don't want to have to cut so much fat that we're going to lose a lot of muscle in the process. So everybody's goal in this period of time should be to put on as much muscle and minimize the fat gain as you go along. For the first 8 months of the year, I was lifting, but I just wasn't taking it super seriously. I didn't really have any specific goal to aim for. I was pretty much just kind of maintaining where I was at, probably doing a little bit less volume than would help me grow, mostly just enough to keep me where I was. In terms of eating, I wasn't really tracking. I was just kind of eating intuitively, trying to get in enough protein to recover from my workouts and get in enough calories just to keep me energized and make sure I wasn't in some absurd deficit that I didn't want to be in. The first thing I did was I started tracking, and I wanted to track for about a week or two just to kind of see where I was at and what nutrients I was getting. After the first week, I instantly corrected my amount of protein because it was quite low, and after that, I calculated how many calories I wanted to be at to begin the bulk. What I did is I just used a calorie calculator, plus knowing myself and having bulked for years, I have a general idea of where calculators put me and where I really need to be. So I bumped it up a little bit. I went to 3,200 calories, and keep in mind to start this process, I weighed about 175 pounds at 5'8". I distributed this 3,200 calories amongst the macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, and fat. For me, I just did 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I actually went a little bit higher and I went to 185. And then for carbohydrates and fats, I pretty much just fill up the rest of the calories. I typically start with 30% of my total daily calories in fat calories. And then I just distribute the rest to carbohydrates, giving me about, give or take, 45 to 50% of my total calories coming from carbohydrates. The way I set up my calories is pretty basic, but that's what works for me. Some people may do better with a little bit more fat, a little bit more carbohydrates. And when I say doing better, I mean either adherence and or feeling better, looking better just day to day within those fluctuations. And that's pretty much been my nutrition and hasn't changed a whole lot. I just went up another 200 calories, but this nutrition has worked for almost 2 months, consistently having me gain weight at a very slow and steady pace. Now, let's talk workouts, because the workouts are a lot more complex in what I did, and there's going to be a lot more nuance depending on where you are currently, what your goals are, what body parts are looking good or lagging behind right now, and based on any injury history, etc., etc. The first thing that I did was I programmed new workouts. Not everybody's going to need to program new workouts, but I knew mine were not sufficient for where I wanted to be, and they were mostly focused on large compounds without having a ton of accessory work, and I knew I was not hitting every muscle group adequately. The way I did this was I first structured my strength work. I typically call this my base work or my compounds, and I do this based off of a typical 5-3-1 program. You can literally look this up on Google if you're interested in doing it that way, but the big important thing is getting some big compound lifts in that are going to drive your strength gains over this period of time. Beyond that, most of the work that you're gonna do as a bodybuilder is gonna be in accessory work. So this could be other variations of large compounds. For example, doing squats, followed by maybe a hack squat or leg extensions or leg curls. There's literally so many things you can do. And the way I like to do these is set them up with a ton of variety and only doing 2 to 3, maybe 4 sets of an exercise in order to keep everything fresh and to make sure I'm hitting muscles in a variety of different ways to determine what's going to help grow me best from the current point that I'm at. The way that this makes sense in my head is, let's say I've been hitting leg curls as my primary hamstring movement for months at a time. Well, maybe my hamstrings have grown in specific parts of the hamstring muscles, because hamstrings are more than one specific string of muscle, I should say. And that means that maybe if you hit some straight-legged deadlifts or some kneeling leg curls, that just based on your anatomy and the way that you've grown in the past, that maybe you're going to develop your hamstrings in a different way by doing more variety. The biggest piece of this is going to make sure that your workout program encompasses hitting every muscle group at least 2 times per week, then also incorporating some muscle groups in larger volumes and some muscle groups in lower volumes, just depending on how each muscle group grows. And I can't say, hey, this one grows with less and this one grows with more. In some, there's some generalized rules. For example, shoulders, especially lateral delts, may need some more volume, and something like hamstrings may need less volume, but that could differ from person to person, and it may depend on what you need to hit, depending on what muscles for you already are looking really good or ahead of the game, and what muscles are lagging behind. The biggest thing I would say is start low, something that your body is somewhat used to, and then add volume as you go. You don't want to jump the volume up by like 5 or 10 sets right off the bat, unless your volume is already really low and you have done something of that tune before. Otherwise, I would just increase it slowly. That way you don't risk injuring yourself along the process. That would defeat everything that we're trying to do here. And that means as you go, as you increase the volume, constantly be monitoring how your body feels. If a muscle group that is pretty well trained stops getting sore or stops feeling weird or stops feeling tired or fatigued after a good session, or the day after, 2 days after, then it might be time to turn the volume up on that specific muscle group. Whereas if you have another muscle group that seems like it's getting absolutely annihilated from a workout session, then maybe you need to tune that volume down, because you don't necessarily need to annihilate a muscle in order to see it grow. And if anything, if it's getting too sore and if it's taking you like 5 or 7 days to recover, then you're probably hitting it too hard to the point where it can't grow. All it can do is hope to recover before the next session. As you go, monitor how you feel, monitor your injury status. If pains start popping up, then take care of them as soon as you can. In bodybuilding, you're putting a ton of stress on your muscles, on your soft tissue, on your bones, honestly on your mentality too. So keep monitoring yourself as you go and make sure that as something arises that you take care of it. Either go see somebody like a physical therapist, or if you're super broke boy status, you go on YouTube, you find a physical therapist who's made a video about your injury, and you try different things until you kind of figure out what is going to make it feel better. But seriously, don't be dumb about not taking care of your body as you go, because I promise you, just pushing through something is probably just gonna make it worse in the long run. One of the best things that you can do throughout this process is build self-awareness, both in your nutrition and in your workouts. Constantly be monitoring how you feel, because that'll give you an indication of things you may be lacking, things you may be going too hard on, and everything in between. Remember, bodybuilding takes a long time, especially if you're in the newer stages of growing. It could take you years and years to really get a strong enough base to actually step on stage. And making sure you actually can physically get to that point is a huge part of that. Another important thing is tracking your progress throughout the entire thing. A couple ways that I'm doing, which I think are really the best things that you can do, include monitoring your body weight. Every single day I'm stepping on the scale. And if you have a fear of the number on the scale, then bodybuilding in the first place probably isn't right for you. You should be able to look at that number super objectively and just take it for a data point. This is something I track in an Excel spreadsheet, and I graph it over time to see how my body's changing. Ideally, for where I'm at in my journey, I want to be gaining at somewhere between 0.5 pound and 1 pound per week maximum. Now, this is only one piece of it. The other piece is determining if my body composition is improving. Especially right out of the gate, I saw a huge improvement in body composition without a drastic change in weight. But because I saw that change in body composition, I stayed with the same protocol because I knew it was working. And the way I determined this is through 2 separate measures. The first one is just how you look. I think this is a super underrated measure of what your body composition is and how it's changing. You can look in the same mirror at yourself every single day in the same light and see changes. Of course, it's hard when you look at yourself every single day, but if you take pictures, you can see large changes week to week. And if you can start see your biceps looking a little juicier, your chest looking a little bit more full, your abdomen looking a little bit more shredded, then that's a good indication that your body composition is changing along with the data that your weight is providing. At the beginning, you may see a good amount of recomposition, losing fat, building muscle, and as you go, and you get more lean, it'll get harder and harder to have those both happen at the same time. Then it may become where you start gaining weight, and later on, when you start shredding, starting to lose weight. Another really good measure of both growth and body composition is taking circumferences. You can get a tape measure at the store for like $2 or $3 and use it to tape yourself at various places on your body to determine growth and how things are changing. For example, I use a tape measure and I measure the very high part around my neck. I'm also measuring around my chest. That'll determine if my lats and my chest are growing. I'm also doing one around my waist, which is a great way to determine if I'm losing fat in the abdomen area. I do mid-arm circumference on both arms to determine the growth and the symmetry of my biceps, along with the mid-thigh to determine if my quads and my hamstrings are growing, and again, the symmetry. And I'm also doing mid-calf to determine if my calves are growing, and again, symmetry. You can do a couple other ones if you want, for example, around the shoulders or various parts of your body. It's whatever you feel like you need to track to go into the show looking your best. The big thing about doing these body composition measures is making sure that you do them the exact same way every time. So picking bony landmarks and figuring out the midway point to do your mid-arm circumference is a really good way to make sure that you're doing it consistently. Same with the mid-thigh, same with the mid-calf, making sure that where you do your waist measurement is the same every time. These numbers can change drastically if you don't do them in the same spot. So you want to make sure to track true progress and not just erroneous error, that you are doing them the same way every single time. And because I have access to it, I've been doing an InBody. We have them at work, and as a dietitian, it's easy for me to throw myself on the InBody. The InBody, though, is not a great measure of progress. It's just not very sensitive to small body composition changes, especially when you are going into something like bodybuilding, where you are probably in the top 10 or 5 or maybe 1% of people in the world. Going forward, this is going to be the same pattern that I follow as I continue to grow up until I get to the end of my bulk and start my shred. At this point of the game, it's all about monitoring progress, making sure that you're growing, making sure that you're growing symmetrically so that you look really, really good, and to set yourself up for an easy and short cut when it comes to the competitive season. And if you missed the first video of this series and you want it for a little bit more context, then click on this card down below to watch the first video of this series. In the next video of this series, I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to talk about. So please put it in the comment section below and I will take you through whatever it is you want to know, whether it's about posing, supplementation, or my mentality about the whole process. Thanks for watching. See you soon.